In Talking to Strangers, What We Should Know About the People We Don't Know, Malcolm Gladwell explores the challenges and consequences of miscommunication and misunderstanding in interactions with strangers. Using a combination of storytelling, research, and analysis, Gladwell examines how human biases, social norms, and flawed assumptions often lead to tragic outcomes when we attempt to interpret the behavior and intentions of people we don't know well. Key themes and concepts. Truth default theory. One of the central ideas in the book is psychologist Tim Levine's truth default theory, which explains why humans instinctively trust others. Gladwell argues that this default to trust is essential for social cohesion, but makes us vulnerable to deception. He illustrates this with examples like the Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme, where Madoff's credibility persisted because people didn't question his facade. Mismatched signals. Gladwell also highlights how body language and facial expressions often mislead us. He cites research showing that people incorrectly assume universal transparency in emotions and intentions, but individuals may not always align with these expectations. The case of Amanda Knox, wrongfully convicted partly because her behavior didn't match societal norms of grief, exemplifies this point. Context matters. The book emphasizes the role of context in understanding strangers. Gladwell discusses how cultural differences, environmental cues, and systemic factors shape behavior, which can lead to misinterpretations. For example, he recounts the death of Sandra Bland, a Black woman who died in police custody after a routine traffic stop escalated. The incident underscores how systemic racism and a lack of cultural understanding contribute to tragic outcomes. The limits of expertise and perception. Gladwell critiques the overconfidence in lie detection, profiling, and judgment. He describes how even experts, such as judges or intelligence agents, frequently fail to accurately assess strangers. The story of Cuban double agents infiltrating the CIA reveals the weaknesses in relying on intuition or gut feelings about trustworthiness. Case studies and historical context. Throughout the book, Gladwell weaves in gripping narratives and historical events, from Neville Chamberlain's failed diplomacy with Adolf Hitler to the sexual abuse scandals involving Larry Nassar and Jerry Sandusky. These stories illustrate how individuals and institutions often ignore red flags because of misplaced trust or flawed assumptions. The central message. Gladwell argues that while humans are inherently flawed in their ability to evaluate strangers, this is not necessarily a failing, but a byproduct of social functioning. Trust and assumptions are necessary for society to operate, but they also require us to recognize their limitations. By acknowledging the complexity of communication, cultural differences, and systemic influences, Gladwell encourages a more compassionate and cautious approach to interacting with strangers. Takeaways. Misunderstandings with strangers often stem from overconfidence in our ability to read people accurately. Biases, cultural differences, and systemic issues complicate interactions and can have dire consequences. To improve interactions, we must question assumptions, consider context, and recognize our own fallibility. Talking to strangers challenges readers to rethink how they approach unfamiliar people and situations, advocating for greater humility and empathy in these interactions.